Welcome to our webinar on mischaracterized BSL analysis and the tools needed to do the analysis and processing. We're running this webinar a second time because we feel like it's really important information that we want to share with folks. And we're really happy to see that there are people who weren't there last time who are attending today. So just to get started, I wanted to do some introductions. My name is Priya Sankalya. I am the Broadband Program Manager at Sanborn. I have been managing most of our broadband projects in the last year or two. Ever since the BEAD program has been online, we've been handling projects for several states, and we've been in the weeds with all of this information from NTIA, and really happy to share what we have on this mischaracterized BSL analysis with you today. I've been with Sanborn and Appgeo before that for the last 15 years, and have been doing everything from managing small local government projects to redistricting to transportation and environmental analysis. And lately, it's all been about broadband. But I'm happy to be here. David?
Hi, I'm David Lukens. I'm a senior data scientist here at Sanborn. Prior to coming to Sanborn, I was the broadband mapping coordinator for the state of Connecticut. So I am deeply familiar with the challenges of trying to deal with all of the nonsense that is in the CostQuest data set and trying to match that then with your goals as a broadband office or a GIS office trying to aid a broadband office, et cetera. Since joining Sanborn, we've worked with a number of states, and I've led everything from processing challenge data, getting that off to the NTIA, doing analysis to form project areas, and all of that sorts of data analysis. And we're really kind of focusing in on this right now as an important piece to that process.
Caitlin?
I'm Caitlin Sanjola. I'm a solution manager with the Appgeo division of Sanborn. And I have worked with multiple states through their BEAD challenge process. I work mostly with our Broadband Navigator, which is our application tool, which we've developed for states with implementation, design, working with the devs to just get out what states are looking for. So kind of client-based focus role.
Great. Thank you both. Just to go over what our plan is for this hour, of course, we're going to dive into the mischaracterized BSL guidance and talk about the analysis that we have developed for identifying these BSLs. And then what are the processing tools that you could use for doing the analysis and also reviewing these BSLs. And then we really want to touch on the value proposition on this analysis. It's all about making, your BEAD dollars go stretch as far as you can. And this is one way that you could do it. And so really wanted to dive into that today. Just a quick note, we will have plenty of time for question and answers at the end, but you could use the Q&A or the chat to put in your questions. We'll try our best to just answer them at the end so that everybody gets a chance to, listen in and maybe we can have a discussion about it. So by now, all of you are probably familiar with the NTIA final proposal guidance. There's a lot of information in there, and we were quite pleased to see that they've included the non-BSL information in there, which was not there before, and that's what's prompted a lot of this, this work that we've done. And, David has been sort of, diving into it, has done the analysis, we've refined the analysis. So just bringing David into the conversation and talking about the guidance and, what the guidance is all about, how it's going to help you, get some additional funding from your BEAD dollars, and also how what we've done for some of the states. So David, I'll let you lead on all of this and share with folks what we've learned and what we can share about the guidance.
Sure. So we got new guidance in late November, and then there were some sudden changes that came out in early December. But essentially, there are a handful of categories that can be used to remove a BSL from funding. And in some cases where, we'll get to the reason codes and all of that later, but in cases where it's been removed from the fabric or where there's a known funding arrangement and an enforceable agreement, those can actually just be omitted from any subgrantee selection process. And that difference is new and very important in terms of making your subgrantee selection process as efficient as possible. But the real thing here is that you can also publish this guidance. You can note that locations are likely not actually fundable. So you can provide potential subgrantees with the information that you have as a GIS office or a broadband office about a handful of locations here that you know are actually haystacks, or locations that you know are actually part of a college campus. So being able to provide that information and build that into the subgrantee selection process, just even at a very small level, even if you're talking about 20 locations you already know about because you've been looking at this data, that can really make a difference in the cost that an ISP is putting forward as part of the process and can make this more efficient. So then there is, as always, a sort of painful process of putting that all into a big table that's going to be checked by the NTIA. That's the final proposal no BEAD locations list. And that's going to have all of your locations as well as reason codes, the type of evidence that you have for that. And that's all prescribed within this guidance. I think the really important thing to think about here is how much more does it cost to go to a rock that is 500 feet away from a street than the house that really is there 200 feet from the street? And how does that end up skewing the costs that ISPs put out? Because they also don't have this information. So the guidance really allows you to sort of take control of some of that, have a more open discussion with ISPs about where really does need to be served in cases where there might not really need to be. And so this kind of opens that conversation. And I think that's what's really important about it.
And I mean, we do want to, share your goal of getting this map as accurate as it can be so that we can get this funding out appropriately. So just diving in again into the actual definition of what these BSLs are, and these locations that are eligible after the challenge process, and they, you don't intend to serve them with BEAD dollars. And they have to be identified and classified before you can submit you're submitting your final proposal. And they fall into these categories. And, David, you're going to, dive into each one of these categories and share examples, which is, I think, it's really kind of mind-boggling how some of these locations are, you can see that they're rocks, but everything from something that's uninhabitable, support structures. Also, they don't require mass market broadband. And then, of course, they're not in the fabric anymore, and then they're funded. And that funding, as we know, keeps changing all the time. So those are also ones that can be removed. And finally, if they're served. So while we understand and acknowledge that this is a moving target, getting this analysis done in advance really might be helpful. So David, I think you're going to share with us more on these, on what how many of these are there, how you're classifying them, and then give us examples.
Definitely. And so it's going to be different in every state. States in the Midwest that have nice gridded road systems and a little bit cleaner parcel data sometimes, they tend to have a little bit lower number of these. Rockier states and urban areas tend to have a little bit higher numbers. So it's going to vary. But in almost every state, we've seen at least 10 to 15% locations that we have been able to identify as very high probability of being mischaracterized. And importantly, like I mentioned before, those aren't just locations that are expected to be at the average cost per location rate. Those are generally locations that are well over that, sometimes twice. Some of them are $1 million if you look in the CostQuest data set. So what this helps you do is clean off some of that fat that is, very obviously incorrect, far away locations that are currently expected to cost a lot of money, and it helps to sort that out. So the challenge here is that then even if, what we do is an automated process that pulls together dozens of data sets and uses an algorithm to say, all right, given that this many data sets give us pieces of evidence to suggest that this is not real, we give it a confidence score based on that. But then even once you have that, it can be really difficult to go through this data. So we provide confidence scores and notes and automated notes and types of locations, and we can do that scoring and put everything within the reason codes and location types that are needed for the NTIA. But one of the big challenges there is how do you actually review these even after that's done? And so one of our, key offerings here is that we not only automate that initial process that brings all of these data sets together, but we can also help provide a tool that will allow you to review these things. So we get automation to bring together multiple evidence types, create these scores in a logical, clear way. And then we can also give you a tool that helps you look through that, understand it, and automatically produce the files that you need for the NTIA.
So, I think the key piece here is the analysis, David. So I think sharing with folks what goes into it, because you can be reviewing these, you can have your own processes, you can come up with these categories, but I think it's kind of unique, the work that's gone into this, all the different data sources that we have tapped into to build this algorithm and this scripting that we've done to come up with these categories. So I'll let you, talk more in detail about what's gone into this analysis and what sources you've used, and then of course dive into the examples.
Yeah, and again, this really comes from my experience being the broadband mapping coordinator in the state of Connecticut before I came to Sanborn, and I immediately noticed when I was at the state of Connecticut that the Millstone nuclear power plant in Connecticut was a BSL. Not only was it a BSL, it was 46 unique BSLs. I filed an FCC challenge and it was rejected for all but 2 of those 46 BSLs. And so that becomes really challenging for a broadband office or a GIS office trying to deal with this. And then so what we really started thinking about was how do we take away that mess, make sure that the evidence is processed quickly and accurately after we've identified these locations. And so, when I started in the state of Connecticut, I was using a few different state layers, a few different national layers, and I was just using that to look around and identify things. As we've been working with more and more states, we've been building out those data sets, building out the places where we're scraping the web to pull additional pieces of information. Can we find this address on Zillow? Can we find it in Google Street Maps? Right? Where can we find these different pieces? And so we use a lot of federal authoritative data sets. We use parcel data, whether that's a state parcel data set or if we need to acquire it from a vendor. We use building footprints. We use 3 different sets of building footprints that are all open source. And then we use our own building detection algorithm to make sure that we're not missing anything in those data sets. We use imagery and LiDAR for that process. And then we're also pulling from all sorts of different sources on the web where we're scraping different land ownership databases, we're scraping OpenStreetMap, we're checking anything we possibly can to try and get corroborating information. Like where do 2 or 3 of these things match? If they do, we can probably trust, yeah, that is this house. But if something isn't on Zillow, it's zoned as residential but vacant in your parcel data. There's no building footprint. We can't detect anything that's not vegetation. The BSL is really far away from the road and there's no pavement that we can find. Like once we are able to put all of those pieces together for any given location, we're able to give that confidence score. And so we pull together all of these data sources and we figure out the relationship between them for each individual BSL through an algorithmic process.
And David, this fits into that like NTI's requirements of attaching evidence to all of this, right? Like they're expecting that.
Well, what they're expecting is that we list the evidence that we used. And
Right.
so this allows us to be able to say, okay, we've referenced this data, this data, this data, and this data, and those all corroborated this. So we're taking all of these different metrics, building footprints, parcel data, putting that in and getting that final classification for the location.
Okay, so now let's have fun with all of the examples that you've got.
And so just before we actually look at the individual reason codes, this is just a really simple example of some of the basic logic that we might apply to look for one particular reason code type. And that's a reason code 1, location type U, which is this location should not have broadband because it's really just a support structure within one parcel. Now, how these locations are still there in the CostQuest data, I don't know, because they shouldn't be allowed to have 2 unique locations in one parcel unless it's a condo, etc. But that's not how it worked. And so this simple example shows a bunch of parcels with 2 locations, and we can easily identify locations that are not on the largest building, are farther away from the road, and can be considered those subsidiary or support structures. So that's just one simple example. When we want to look at things a little bit more complicated and we want to try and get all of those reason codes in.
That's when we dive into each reason code.
So we have reason code 1, location type B. This is a non-habitable structure. And so this could apply to a lot of different things. In states with a lot of water, we're seeing a lot of docks that are being identified as BSLs. So in a lot of cases, we might mark a dock as a non-habitable structure. There is something there, but nobody's living on it, right? We also see things like restrooms or sheds in parks that we can easily identify as a non-habitable structure based on the different characteristics that we're going to get when we look at land ownership databases, when we try and pull up that location on Google Street Maps, when we try and scrape any sort of data around that. I didn't mention it, but on the last slide, it's at it's about $31,000. And so each of these slides has the number from CostQuest cost model. That's not a number that we've generated or anything. That's from the CostQuest cost model, and they add up real quick. And so then we have location type R under reason code 1, and those are just landforms. These are the ones that you're probably most familiar with. Haystacks, piles of lumber, that kind of thing. That's just something laying out that had a few vertices. So when CostQuest used an automated process to find those structures, they were able to identify, okay, there are 4 vertices here, call it a building. And so landforms like this are the most difficult to accurately identify because we have to prove a negative. So in this case, we first, okay, there's no building footprint there. The parcel says that it's vacant. We find all of these things. And then we have to do a backwards check and try and make sure that there's nothing actually there. And so to do that, we have our own footprint detection algorithm because it takes way too long to actually extract these things. But if we just try to detect them, if we use a few different algorithms that look for different indices that try to tell us that's not vegetation, that actually is wood, that actually is stone, right? We can do different things to detect what bounces off of the reflectance and what we're able to guess that is. And then we're able to go, all right, there is something there. Are there vertices? Is there a reason to think that this is an actual structure? And so in this example as well, this is $317,000 and not a thing there. And so we're doing that same process. We
Another
also
one. Islands.
Yeah, if you're a coastal state, you really have to deal with all of the islands and small landforms around the coast that are often getting picked up as structures. In some cases, these are only, this is a pretty cheap island. Like you could build to any island for $25,000. But in this particular case, it's picking up some rocks and like just the edge of the sand, right, as a vertices. So what we're able to do is then confirm that is not a structure. and go ahead and list that as reason code R, or one location type R. Then, like we showed before with the extra structures in the parcel, there are other types of support structures as well that fall under location type U. And so we'll see things like sheds, silos, barns, and these are sometimes difficult to identify because they might be a very similar size to a farmhouse. But so what we do in this case is we try and look at the different locations in relationship to the right of way. We look at ways of identifying other types of infrastructure like silos and barns together. And then we also look at the size of the building footprint. Sometimes they're very small building footprints, or sometimes they're very large. So large warehouses, large barns, they're going to be way bigger than a normal residence. So we use all of that information, we count vertices, and we compile all of that information to see which location within a parcel should be identified. This is another example where this is just a water treatment facility way out in the middle of a farm. And this is my favorite. This is just a bridge, but not the, I don't think it was the bridge that was originally identified as a location. I'm pretty sure, and this is complete conjecture on my part, it was actually the semi. So the semi that was there when this location was created is no longer even in the imagery, but there was a semi that had just enough of a shadow probably that it found the four vertices and was like, there's a location. But so these are really simple to identify, but then we have to be able to collect all of that evidence and make sure. So we find locations that are directly within rights of way, highways. We find locations that are in water features. And then we figure out which of those structures, are actually errors. Sometimes there are small features on a bridge that need to be connected to the internet, et cetera. And we're able to collect that information, the photography, everything that is needed there, and then identify that those are mobile structures. So then reason code 1, all of those locations were just locations that shouldn't have internet, right? Reason code 2 are different. These are locations that should not be mass market customers. And this is, I think this causes a lot of confusion throughout the BEAD program, because when the initial list of locations was released from CostQuest, it included all of your superstores, all of your supermarkets, every business. It was just anything that they could put vertices on. And so a lot of those are still being cleaned out of the data set. It is getting better, but what we still see a lot of is these big box stores, Best Buy, Menards, Home Depot, Lowe's, any of those types of stores that are generally isolated. They're huge building footprints, and they typically have ownership or other web scrapable information that we can find to confirm that those are the locations. And so we pull all that information to try and make sure we can understand where there are enterprise locations. They generally have these, large building footprints and are a bit farther from roads. We can try and identify those large parking lots as well. And so you have, 15, 20 of these in your state, you're already talking about, $5 million or $500,000.
Our favorite CAIs.
Another big problem with our data sets when it comes to CostQuest is community anchors. And this was a pain for every state that was trying to deal with the challenge process as well. But trying to manage, okay, which parts of our total broadband serviceable location fabric are locations that really should have gigabit symmetrical service, and which parts are just BSLs. In the case of CAIs, we do want to fund those if they need it, but most universities across the country, especially universities, already have internet access, and they probably have better internet access than the house right down the road. So we probably don't want a lot of our funding going there. And so what we try to do is, in the case of community anchors, we try to make sure that we identify them not only as a community anchor that isn't a mass market customer, but also the different types of community anchors, so that a state can try and think through, well, daycare facilities they might be a business, they might even be a chain, but we still want to make sure we support that. So making sure we can identify that and also keep that information about what type of place this is and where we got that information can help states make better decisions about, maybe we don't want to take all of these out, but we definitely don't need to fund the the gymnasium next to the football field at this university. Another whole set of these are government-owned properties. And this is a lot, especially as you go further west in the United States, more and more property is owned by the government. And then you have local, state, and federal government that owns a lot of land and a lot of small facilities, water treatment facilities and the like are huge dollar amounts in the CostQuest data set. So we're talking $90,000 for this water treatment facility. And so we're able to use a bunch of existing federal, state, and local data sets to find those and then confirm them with things like land ownership databases and the like.
So David, before we move on to the next reason code, which is the funded locations, and it kind of segues into one of the questions that's come in. From your experience looking at the data, what kind of numbers are we looking at for how many you found of each of these categories?
So I think the largest group is generally in reason code 1. The largest chunk is locations that are just not there or just shouldn't receive any broadband. That's probably closer to 6 or 7% of what we're seeing. I would say 6 or 7% of the total eligible. Right? And then generally, reason code 2 is closer to maybe 3. And I mean, this is not a precise number, but I would say, so if we're talking 15%, it's usually something like 6, 3. If we've been asked to do the funding analysis, that's usually a pretty small number because states usually have that pretty dialed in from the challenge process. What we're looking for there, and I'll talk about that in a second, is a very specific type of thing. And
so I guess I'm just going to ask the question now because that kind of fits in. Jim's asking, is there any place where the false positive, which is rocks, and false negative, which is missing structures, locations are reported? Where can I find the error rates for my state? So I think that's just the point, right? That is this available, this information?
Not currently. The CostQuest does report changes in the fabric. Our goal here is to provide that information.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So CostQuest says like, hey, here's what we did. We changed the fabric. And reason code 3, which we don't talk about here because you don't need us to tell you which locations are not in the fabric anymore, right? That's a pretty simple task. We do it for you if you want us to help with it. But the real danger with that is that CostQuest has said, okay, these locations are no longer BSLs. But we've also done some work with ISPs, and there are tons of locations that have broadband subscribers, residential broadband subscribers, and their locations have just been wiped off the map. Now, in that case, in terms of BEAD funding, we don't really have a problem. They already have service. But it does tell you that just because a location is removed from the fabric doesn't mean that it's actually a false positive in terms of a location. So it's also important to go back and do some of this analysis and check those locations to make sure they really should be removed before you just omit them all without worrying about it.
Okay, so let's move on to reason code 4, funded locations.
So one thing we've seen in a lot of states, especially with RDOF funding, is that providers, if given an opportunity, will happily say, yeah, we are serving that other side of the street as well. Because a lot of times RDOF polygons they are always based on blocks. And so if they're based on the census boundary, a lot of times that is along a road. And so they're going to be building out along this road, and there are homes on the other side of that road. And so this is a relatively simple part of the analysis, but we just like to bring all of these things together and incorporate them. And so what we're trying to look for here is cases where FCC funding or other types of funding are based on specific census boundaries, and those boundaries might be incorrectly identifying locations as unfunded or unserved. And this allows, what we do here is we're just trying to set up an opportunity for a state to communicate with an ISP and say, hey, can you please make sure that these are not included in your build, right? Because a lot of this, no matter what information we might be able to provide you, what we're really trying to enable is better communication with ISPs, more openness, more transparency to get to that best map, to get to the most accurate map possible.
Okay, and then the served locations.
And so this is another piece that was added very late to the guidance, but I'm glad it was, in the that you are able to identify locations that are served, but do not require, but are currently listed as eligible per the FCC or per your challenge data. And the difference here is that what the NTA guidance says is that you must have BDC filings, if you were doing it now, as of version 5, that show that that location is served. And so we do two types of analysis here. Obviously, we can do that. We can make sure that we can do that check for you and just see, okay, is it served in the newest data? Then what do you need to do? What do you need to do to talk to ISPs and get additional evidence? Because that's required as well. But the other piece of this is that there are a lot of locations in every state that we've worked with where ISPs' legacy data systems just don't convert well to the FCC's newer, now it's a couple years old, BDC system. And location-based data is great. I'm glad we're doing it, going in the right direction. But the challenge is that some of these locations don't have real addresses in the fabric. And so when a provider tries to match that address, they're never going to get it. If they just try to use a buffer and say, okay, we're along this road, they end up missing things when it's 2 locations at a particular point in the corner of a condo complex like this. And in other cases, they're actually trying to match address to address to address based on a string. And as a result, they miss a lot of addresses that are obviously part of their footprint. And so by no means should we assume that they serve all of those, but it's a really good opportunity, especially if you don't have enough funds to get to everywhere, to open a conversation with providers in your state and say, hey, based on this analysis we've performed, where we've looked at the distance from a served location, the distance from the right-of-way, a shared right-of-way with another served location, and the clustering of served locations within an area, combined all of that stuff to say, this unserved location is likely served by this provider, then we can open that conversation with the provider and say, hey, if you want us to ignore this location when we're building out, you would need to amend your BDC filing and you would need to provide us evidence A, B, and C. And the thing about this is that unlike the challenge process, which ended up being very ISP centric, and once the ISP said, oh, we have this evidence done, if you don't take it, we're going to talk to the NTA. Hey, it was sometimes challenging. In this case, you're very much in the driver's seat, and it's just an opportunity for you to open that door one more time and say, hey, we don't want to fund a location that's already funded. This is the detail that we have. If you have more, please provide us that evidence. And so just these 2 locations are 54,000, and that, no, go ahead, Caitlin. And then if you look at a neighborhood like this where the strings just clearly don't match up because the names of the streets are different in the fabric, you're talking about another $400,000 that you could sort out all in one swoop because it is actually served.
And this really adds up in dollars before you know it.
Yeah, just going through this slide deck, we've already hit $1 million.
There you go. So this kind of brings us to the tools. What are you going to do with this information that you have? And we built the broadband navigator, and of course this is one way of doing it. And so what we're going to share with you today is Caitlin's going to demo this solution for us to show you how you can actually review these BSLs. And essentially, it's a 2-part process where our team does the analysis and then loads that into the broadband navigator. And we realized that when we built the broadband navigator, we built it for the challenge process, and it really is a tool for communication and adjudication, which is what, we used it for the challenge process, but then we've built on it for reviewing these mischaracterized BSLs because, we can do our analysis, but there's so much in the middle, which, will require some additional sort of manual or manual review. So giving you the tools to do that is, what we are hoping to achieve with this. So it was, we used this tool for the sub-grantee selection process, but now this is the additional add-on. So what the functionality of this tool is that, of course, you can do all the visualization of the input, so you can actually see that the BSL in the context of other source data. You can also filter and select locations based on some common characteristics, for example, a score or just, all these reason codes that David just walked us through. And then you can also assign the review to unique users. And, Caitlin's going to walk us through all of this. And I think the key piece here is centralizing all of this in one place, this decision-making process, instead of it being piecemeal. And then that makes it easier to, if NTIA for whatever reason is going to dig into it, it's all in one place. And then finally, I think one of the real assets to all of this is that you can then submit this as a direct output as a Fabric challenge. So that's what the functionality we've built, and we're going to share that with you. So I'm going to hand it over to Caitlin, who's going to talk about the tool, which we've all worked on, and she's done a lot of work on the design, and so I'll let her take over.
Thanks, Priya. So David just kind of walked through the analysis portion of this, but now we can kind of dig into the review, the decision, and then finally the challenge that we get into here. So I'm going to steal Priya's screen and share my screen, and we can kind of dig into what we have here. Can you confirm for me that you can see that?
It takes a second. Yeah, yes, you can.
Oh, okay, great. So like Priya said, we initially built this Broadband Navigator for the BEAD challenge process just to help states navigate through their BEAD challenge process, but we've expanded upon it to help with the mischaracterized BSLs. So while this tool has a ton of different uses, it has a lot of features. On the map portion, what we're really interested in looking at right now is the mischaracterized BSL portion. So when you come into the map, you'll see here, and then you log in as a user, and you can hop in up to this review BSLs. And here, when you come into this screen, this is going to be all of those BEAD eligible locations. And David has already done the analysis and put it into this application. So in here are going to be all BEAD eligible locations for the state. And then the analysis is already done and it already has been applied, any scores, the reason code, location type, etc. So if we just kind of walk through what this looks like, we have the address, the county, location type, so landform, for instance, the location ID, assignee, score, reason code, the status, and then those actions if you want to challenge or dismiss. So you can look at this location and you can look over, just kind of an overview of what we see here. And then you can sort any of these fields as well. So for example, if you want to sort by score, again, these scores are applied to the locations based on whether or not we believe that they're probably a mischaracterized BSL. So those scores with 10 are almost certain that they're a mischaracterized BSL. But those with a 0, probably not. They're probably don't need to look at those too hard. But those are the higher scores. So say we want to look at the score of an 8. And maybe we want to sort by a reason code, and we want to look at maybe reason code 1. Those that are those landforms. So we can sort through them on here with our nice filter feature, and we can get a look at some of these locations here. So if I select a location, I can see the information on the side panel. So here we're looking at the location in the center here, and we can see these blue lines here are going to be those parcel lines. This is the location, and this is showing you the selected location. On the map, you can actually turn on and off any of these layers that are in the map itself, which is really nice. So you can turn on and off the selected location. You can turn the parcels on and off. You can also switch the base map. So if you want to turn that imagery off, you can go ahead and do that and just see the street map, turn it back on, turn off the service locations, or keep them on to get just some helpful information about what's around you. You can see the address here. If you want to take a look at it on Google Maps, you can actually select this here and it brings you right to a Google Maps page that shows, if you can see on the Google Maps, it shows you on the Google Maps where this location is. You see all the corresponding information here. So we see the reason code, location type, confidence score, etc. And then there is some more information here as well. So say we do want to actually challenge this location and we're saying, hey, this location for sure is a mischaracterized BSL. We have photographic evidence, which you can select in this evidence available below, and you want to go ahead and challenge it. You can do that really easily by just selecting photographic evidence. You can save that change. Then you can select up top here and challenge the location. So that's an easy way to challenge locations, but you can also do things in bulk, which is really helpful too. So say we go through and we decide, hey, a lot of these are coming up that we want to challenge them. We can go in and we can select multiple of them and we can bulk challenge them. So we can do challenge here, challenge all of them at once. We can also do the same thing if we want to dismiss them. If we've gone through and we've decided that we want to dismiss any of these, that they're not mischaracterized BSLs and we don't want to challenge them, we can select them, dismiss. Additionally, you can select all, and you can also do bulk assignments. So another great feature that Priya talked about is the ability to assign users in here. So anybody who's part of your office can come in and create an account. And when they create that account in the system, you can assign them any of the locations that you want them to review. So for example, if you want somebody to review all of one score, all of one reason code, etc., you can select them all, you can select a couple, and you can go ahead and just assign them straight to that user. So I'm in a test account, so I'm going to assign to the test broadband office user. But if you were an office of 5 or so people, you would see every person there. You can select those multiple, you can assign them over to them, and then it's just a lot easier for going back and forth in the system. You can then select the Assign to Me feature up top, and you'll see all those locations that are assigned to yourself. So here I have those that are a score of 8 with a reason code of 1 that are assigned to me. But if I want to clear that filter, which I can do so here, I can see everything that's assigned to me. So here in my queue, I see I have a couple locations that I need to look through and I need to make a decision on. So if we go into one of them again, we can say, okay, here's 89 Houlihan Road. This is a landform. It has a score of 8, a reason code of 1. And we can take a look at it. If we open it up, we see that this is a bridge. So no, this is not a BSL. We're going to want to go ahead and challenge that. So we can take a look at some of the information with it, but you can see pretty clearly from the image right here that this is not going to be a BSL. You can look through all your corresponding information. You can select the evidence available that you have. You can save that. And then I can either challenge up top here, but you can also challenge by selecting the button down here too. So there's a couple different avenues to go. So we can challenge that. Awesome. Another example, if we open up this, for example, we'll see this is a reason code 2. The location type's an enterprise, and we have a really big confidence score here. So we're totally confident. And this actually is in fact a Walmart. So we probably want to go ahead and challenge this location as well. Can challenge that. And so it's just a really easy way to go through all of these locations, assign them to each other, view them, be able to get some good information on the location so you can make that decision all in one place with your team. Another good feature is the comment feature, which I forgot to mention down here, where you can create comments on any of these locations. Let's say not a BSL. Let's submit a comment, and it saves that comment for you, and then anyone in your organization can see that comment. So after we challenge the locations, you can actually come over to this challenged BSLs and you'll see that list of locations that we challenged. We challenged these three. And what's really handy about this section is when you're ready, when you have all of the locations that you want to challenge, you can press challenge submission export. So you'll press that. You'll see that that list just got cleared. These are all getting pushed into our challenge submission export, which goes into our exported BSLs. And those are now packaged for a bulk challenge. So you can automatically take those and do a bulk challenge. On the other hand, if you've dismissed items, dismiss something here. You'll see them show up in the list here for dismiss, but you can, of course, go back and challenge them if you like. You can download all of your mischaracterized BSLs as a CSV if you want to do things like that, and then you can go ahead and view them on a CSV as well. So all those fields that we saw on the right-hand side when you opened up that sidebar, if you downloaded the CSV, you can see them in here. So you can kind of do a big bulk look at everything and sort and filter however you like. And that's just kind of an overview. Again, it's just a really easy way to go through. You can go in, you can view your sidebar, you can view your location, turn things off and on, comment and assign throughout your organization. Go ahead and check that evidence. And then when you're ready, you can challenge those locations and get that export for the bulk challenge. Priya?
That's great. Thank you so much, Caitlin. I think I see a question that's come in, which, I'm hoping both you and David can answer, is that, does the data get sent to the FCC? So, correct me if I'm wrong, David, but the schema is all set up so that it can be made as a bulk challenge. So maybe talk to that a little bit.
Yeah, we can't send it directly to the FCC because you have to be an eligible challenger for all of that. But what we do is we package it up in exactly the format that is required by the FCC for a bulk challenge. You can do them piecemeal, right? So you could do 20, export, pull it down as a CSV, 20, 20 more, or you could wait, have your team be working on it for a week. And, you don't have to necessarily work on all of these. You could say, all right, we've reviewed a few of the 9s and 10s and we get it. These really make sense. There's a lot of evidence for these, but we want to make sure we want to look at the 4, 5s and 6s that are more on the line. So we generally say that if it's 5 or above, we're fairly confident. But if you want to look at some of those edge cases, 4, 5, 6, that's a good place where you might say, yeah, let's do a little bit of review on some of those and we'll package those up. So that's where you could use that bulk select. You could take all the 10s and 9s and just say, you know what? We think these are good. We've looked at enough of them. We're happy with those. Let's go back and we're going to review some of the 5s and 6s first. And then you could take those, and when you're done with that, then you export to the CSV and you can upload it directly to the FCC's challenge portal.
Awesome. That's great. So I don't know, Caitlin, do you want to share the deck? Can you, or do you want to swap with me?
I actually don't have it open.
Okay, we can swap then. I'll just start sharing.
And while Priya's pulling that up, one thing I do want to mention is that we also have the ability to take ISP comments or comments from local governments. We give you a format, it's a basic CSV template, and then we can add those as comments. So when you're going in to review locations, not only would you see your team's comments, but you're able to see comments provided by other external stakeholders. Because that's really, for me, trying to manage this process when I was in the state of Connecticut, what I really wanted to see is places where every source that I could find agreed and external parties agreed, right? So that's really that sweet spot where you can go, all right, here are 10,000 locations that we would otherwise be spending, millions of dollars on, that we can just say, all right, I think we can go ahead and, clear these out pretty quickly. And then as you have time, as you're working with providers, right, as you go into negotiation with subgrantees, they're going to bring you some of these locations. And so depending on where you are in the process, you might be able to get ahead of that. But even if you've already started pulling these out, even if you've already started making agreements with subgrantees, you can find ways of incorporating this information and making sure that as you go into negotiation, you at least have the best information possible. Because what you really don't want is an ISP to come to the table and say, hey, we don't think these are locations, and you don't have the information to make a decision about that and make sure that there's not actually a house way back on that road that maybe the ISP doesn't know about. Maybe they just don't want to spend the money to get there. And so this gives you a tool, even after the fact, uh, to make sure that you have the best information possible and can check all of those things.
That's great. I mean, I think we've just to wrap up here. I hope this has been helpful to you all. Dave, we talked about right at the start, what this process is, what the analysis was that went into it. We shared with you the tool that we've built, but also the process and how this can be beneficial to you. So just wrapping up, David, on the benefits of this, I think it's sort of reiterating that it's most important that you save, stretch your dollars as much as you can. And so I don't know if there's anything more that you can add about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think we think about this in terms at the beginning of BEAD, right? Everyone just wanted to increase their allocation. So everyone was looking for the missing buildings. At this point, your allocation's fixed, and this is about making sure that ISPs don't send trucks out somewhere to look for a location and bill you for it. It's about making sure that you can plan effectively and set, as you're thinking about how you're going to design your project areas, if you're still in that stage, having this information helps you design better, if it's your goal, fiber focused project areas, and identify more clearly the areas that are probably just going to be alternative technologies, because you can better think through where your extremely high cost threshold will actually be.
So, I mean, what we're trying to get across here is that this is, work that we've done. Broadband offices have a lot on their plate. There are deadlines. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. You have variable staffing. So, we are available. We've done this work. We've done it now for a few states, and would really like to help you take your dollars as far as they can go. It has a lot of benefits, of course. And the one thing that I wanted to bring up again, David, is timing, right? I think a lot of states are concerned about, should I do this now, given that I'm already done with my subgrantee process. So let's talk to that in the few minutes that we've left. I think that it's key to do it wherever you are in the BEAD process, but maybe speak to that.
Yeah, I think in a perfect world, you started the BEAD challenge process with this information, but it's not. It's not a perfect world. And if you can do this before creating project areas, great. It gives you more information there. If you can do this during subgrantee selection, great, because then you can start to push that information out to ISPs and tell them, hey, as you're bidding, maybe you should consider this information. We maybe don't have a complete decision yet, but we just want you to know that we think these locations are suspect. Please consider, lowering your bids for these areas. And then even if you're past subgrantee selection, what I was just talking about is you need to balance the information differential here with ISPs, right? They have people out in the field. They're looking at locations. Generally, you have no choice but to trust them. You can either say, you must serve all BSLs. It doesn't matter what they are. We don't care. Or you're just going to trust them when they say that something's not real or is real. The benefit of having this analysis at that point is that you have something to go off when they say this is real, this isn't real, we need to add a location here, anything like that. And it also gives you the ability to say, you know what, I don't think this project area should cost this much, given that 50 of these locations are actually yours, Mr. ISP, and you just didn't report them in the BDC at the time. So let's make sure that that's fixed. So it gives you tools all the way through subgrantee selection and even after the fact. So I think it's beneficial, and I think the most important thing there is just making sure that you're on a level footing with an ISP and other stakeholders, making sure that you know what's actually going on and what these locations are.
And the name of the game is efficiency. That's the new favorite word. So I think we're adding to that. Let's hope that that you would consider this process and improve your data. Just if you have any questions, we're still here for a few minutes. Please pop them into the Q&A. or in the chat, and we can address them. If you've, hopefully you've got something out of this. We're, actually really pleased that we could come up with this analysis and this tool. It's a great tool for doing the communication and adjudication of these BSLs. And you have the contact information here, so reach out. We're happy to dive more into any of this analysis and any questions that you have. One thing I was going to point out, as Caitlin was doing the demo, is that more details, David, that has like some of the outputs from the analysis, right? So like if anybody has any questions about what went into the analysis and what comes out of it, that's in that tool as well. So I don't know. I'll stay up for a minute if anybody has any questions. Also happy to take you off mute, and if you needed to ask us questions directly. Okay, I think we've covered it all. Thank you all for joining today, and we hope to hear from you. You have our contact information. Get in touch, and be happy to help. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.